Well, it's time for another health message. It's been probably a couple months since I gave you one. So today I want to talk about how you can get nutrition. Now, everyone eats, but not everyone gets the nutrition that God had in mind. And how to have a better digestion. Paul, in addressing the subject of health as well as spiritual things, said in 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, "What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and you're not your own?" He's saying this in the form of a question because it would seem that they didn't realize that God wanted to make their body a temple for Him to dwell in. But in order for the body to be a temple, we have to realize that we belong to Him. And what we do is really not up to us, but it's up to the manufacturer's instructions. And if you try to do differently from what the manufacturer knows is best, is it going to bother the manufacturer? Well, if it's God, yes. But if it's man, He doesn't care. You don't have to follow it. But you will pay if you don't follow it. So it behooves us to listen to what God says about it. And then there's an additional statement, "For ye are bought with a price." And that's the biggest price that could ever be paid for anything, because it cost Jesus pain and suffering and death. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. So we belong to Him by creation, by redemption, if we have accepted redemption. But even if we haven't, He still paid the price to buy us back. And so this puts a real responsibility on us about how we treat our body. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 17 says, "Blessed art thou, O land." Well, I think we can say we're not blessed today. "Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season." In other words, they don't eat between meals. They eat when they're supposed to eat. Eat in due season, for strength and not for drunkenness. So they eat in a way that's going to give them energy and strength to do the work that God has assigned them to do. It's a great blessing when the king is like that, or any leader is like that. It's a great blessing. But, that's very few today. Unfortunately, in general, you can't follow your leaders in regard to what they do. But since Jesus is our true leader, then we can follow what He said. In a book put together called Healthful Living, this was put together by a group of medical students who were attending Ann Arbor in Michigan to get their degree as a doctor, and they recognized the value. Most doctors today don't recognize the value, but these doctors to be, they recognized the value of the instruction that was given to Seventh-day Adventists. So while they were studying, they made a compilation, and it's very interesting, some of the things that it tells us about. Right at the beginning of the book, it says in page 14, ignorance of physiology and neglect to observe the laws of health have brought many to the grave who might have lived to labor and study intelligently. Now, the purpose of sharing this is not to criticize what people have done, but they may have to pay the price. However, it is to point us in a direction of how it's best to live. And we talk a lot about the 8 laws of health, which are extremely valuable, but I don't see it talked as much about physiology. And so a neglect to understand physiology and a failure to practice those things bring people to the grave much sooner than what they need to go. And if you don't want to end up there too soon, then it would be wise to acquaint yourself with these things. Also on page 13 it says it is our duty to study the laws that govern our being and conform to them. So we are to study it, but then we're to practice it. Why? Because ignorance in these things is what? Sin. Now I find a strong reaction to this in the general population. They don't like it to be called a sin because they want to keep on doing the things that they shouldn't be doing. But why is it a sin? Because it damages what God has paid so much for. And it hinders our ability to do what he needs us to do. And so it truly is sin not to practice what we have studied. And of course it's a sin to avoid the study as well, I would say. Page 162 now, we're going to zero in on the digestive system, which includes the stomach. The stomach has a controlling power upon the health of the entire body. So how we treat our stomach is going to affect every aspect of our life, all aspects. The brain nerves are in strong sympathy with the stomach. So even the brain will not work well if the stomach is being abused. So is that important to spirituality or not? Yes. Absolutely. So all this idea that these kind of things don't matter, they just don't understand the whole impact of it. It's so important that we're supposed to start our children out teaching them about this physiology. Page 13, it says, it is well that physiology is introduced into the common schools, that means the grade school, as a branch of education. Very few schools do anything about this subject. It should be regarded as the basis of all educational effort. So really the foundation of education has to do with physiology and those things that pertain to our health. Why? Because everything we accomplish in life is based on our health. And many people don't give it attention until they get sick. Then they start thinking about the body. But we're supposed to start, even as small children, to learn how to care for the body and to practice it throughout our entire life. I wish I had learned sooner. And actually, I wish I had learned at Wildwood. Can you believe that we were at Wildwood? We took a whole year's training at Wildwood, and we still didn't understand, or I didn't, how to care for my body. And so that's where I really got messed up early in life. But by paying attention, the Lord has restored some of those years. I don't know how many He will, but He's restored quite a few already. It should be regarded as the basis of all educational effort. Page 161, the stomach has a controlling power upon the health of the entire body. So it's like the door, that if we don't go through that door, then we're going to have trouble with the whole body. Here's a very important issue, and we're going to look at a number of issues today. Not spend a long time in either one, but page 161 says thorough mastication is a benefit both to the teeth and the stomach. So, whether we chew our food long enough will make a huge difference in our health. And it makes a big difference in regard to our stomach. It mentions specifically, and in our teeth, it will make a big difference. In our culture, people are in too much of a hurry to get done their meal. Here's one that should help in better chewing of the food. The reference will be at the end of this slide. The benefit you derive from your food does not depend so much on the quantity eaten as on its thorough digestion. So, of course, chewing the food is a very, very important part of the digestion program. In fact, as I've read different stories, I learned one very interesting fact. I've learned many, but one fits with this. There was a prisoner that was in a communist prison in Cuba for 25 years. Now, during this time, they frequently gave the prisoners very, very little food. And most of the prisoners were so starving hungry. When they got that food, they just gobbled it up and it was gone. But this one Adventist pastor, somehow the Holy Spirit helped him to understand. And so he chewed that food until you couldn't even tell it was food anymore. And he was able to live. Whereas many of the other prisoners died from so little food, but he was able to live. That is powerful proof of the truthfulness of this statement. The benefit you derive from your food does not depend so much on the quantity, how much you eat, eaten as on its thorough digestion. Another interesting tip, nor the gratification of the taste so much on the amount of food swallowed as on the length of time it remains where? In the mouth. Now, most of us eat food for the taste, right? But the common practice is to get too much taste. What I mean is eat too much for the taste. But God's plan is to enjoy the taste by how long you chew it, rather than having to get so much to be satisfied that you've had enough of that taste. So what's the answer? Eat slowly and allow the saliva to mingle with the food. Actually, the saliva begins the digestion. And the stomach was not made to do the work of the saliva. And so when it goes into the stomach without adequate saliva mixed with it, the stomach is damaged to process it. Now, God knew what people would do, so he made the stomach to be able to survive for quite a while, even though it got abused. But there is a limit to how long the stomach can be abused and not retaliate as a result of it. So we want the food, when it goes into our stomach, to be adequately mixed. And I would suggest, I practiced this morning. I've tried to eat slower, but I'm eating even slower now after preparing this. And if you chew it till it's a complete paste and you can't feel any of the ingredients, then it has plenty of saliva mixed with it. And you will still enjoy the taste. There's no problem with the taste. So this is all from Healthful Living 161. Here's some instruction about when to eat and when not to eat. Those who are excited, anxious, or in a hurry cannot supply the necessary gastric juice. So if something's gotten you all excited and your nerves are all on edge, that's not a good time to eat, because your body can't even produce enough gastric juice. And if you're worried about something, you're very anxious, it's not a good time. Or if you're in a hurry, your mind is on what you got to do in 10 minutes, and your body can't produce the gastric juice. You got to be relaxed. You got to be, not all stirred up in all these ways. In page 162, it says it is important that we relish the food we eat. If we cannot do this, but eat mechanically, we fail to be nourished and built up as we would be if we could enjoy the food we take into the stomach. Now, this really is important instruction to those that want to eat healthfully. I have seen so many people who are trying to eat healthfully, but you can hardly stand to eat the food because it doesn't taste good. And how can you fulfill this? You end up, you need to eat, so you eat mechanically. You're not enjoying your food. And this also damages our ability to get the most out of our food. So we have to seek to do our best at preparing things that are tempting. I've even heard people say, well, we shouldn't have so many wonderful dishes because people might overeat. Well, it's not our job to control people from overeating. Our job is to present delicious food. their job is responsible for not overeating. And everybody has to learn that lesson of, and the interesting thing, I didn't put a quote in here on this, but the interesting thing is, if you chew your food slowly, you don't desire as much volume to eat. It's amazing. There's a certain period of time that hunger seems to exist. And so if you stretch it out to fill up that period of time, you feel full and you've had enough. And so it helps that as a byproduct. Page 164, 5 hours at least should be given between each meal. And always bear in mind that if you would give it a trial, you would find that 2 meals would be better than 3. Now, in the usual American style of eating, that won't work, because people eat almost nothing for breakfast and they have a huge meal at night. So they're really only getting 2 meals with a snack in the morning. But it's better to get that changed to where we eat a big meal in the morning and a big meal at what's called lunch. I grew up calling it dinner. I believe that came from the days where it was a big meal at lunchtime. So how long do we need between? 5 hours at the minimum. You can get more if your body needs more, but that's a minimum of time. Why? Because the stomach needs some rest before the next meal. It will work best if it has some rest before the next meal. Page 165 says, if a third meal be eaten at all, it should be light and several hours before going to bed. So if it's something small, it won't take 5 hours, although we're recommended to try to have 4 hours before bedtime. So it's up to us. The choice is ours. We want to eat a third meal. Skinny people may need it. Others probably don't. But if it's taken, it should be light. The stomach, when we lie down to rest, should have its work all done, that it may enjoy rest, as well as other portions of the body. That's the longest period of time the stomach gets to rest. And the rest of the time, it may get a short time to rest. The work of digestion should not be carried on through any period of the sleeping hours. This is from Healthful Living 162. After the stomach, which has been overtaxed, has performed its task, it becomes weary by being kept constantly at work. Now, some of you might have heard the story told by Eric B. Hare. He was the greatest storyteller in my young years in the Adventist Church. Wherever he went, people wanted him to tell a story. And he tells the story of this maid, this little girl, that was a slave.
The title was The Mean Mistress.
Yeah, mean mistress. And the mistress brought out some cream to be made into butter. And so the maid was, back in those days they had to plunge the plunger until it turned into butter. And it got almost to the point of being butter, and the mean mistress came out and dumped in some more cream. So the poor maid had to do it again. and she got it almost to the point where it would be butter, and the mean mistress came out and put more cream in there. Well, the poor girl is about to collapse from exhaustion. And then he points out, he was talking about the stomach, what people do. Having no time for rest, the digestive organs become enfeebled. See, and that's where we start having trouble, because their stomach is not able to do what it used to do anymore. Hence the sense of goneness. So you eat a big meal and, this meal, wiped out. And desire for frequent eating. Isn't that interesting? You know, Satan's a liar, and everything he does is a lie. And so people feel, well, I need to eat again. But what the stomach is saying, I need rest. The stomach must have its regular periods for labor and rest. Stomach does need to work, yes, but it needs rest as well. So what are some of the common mistakes that most of us grew up with? Maybe a few of you got raised right from the beginning. But here's what a few, and there may be more, but these I thought of. A heavy meal at night. You know, people they don't want to get up too early, so they're in a hurry to get to work, and so they take off with just a little bit of food, which they probably ate without being relaxed, and they get to work, and they've only got a half hour for lunch, and so they grab something quick for lunch, and then when they get back home for night, now they can relax and eat a big meal. But that is a big problem to the body. Wasn't made to do that. Number 2, eating less than 4 hours before bedtime. So that heavy evening meal is often, you know, when people were mostly farmers, they would eat at 6 o'clock in the morning and at 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock maybe. Well, then there was some farmers went to bed at 8 o'clock, but things today have changed greatly from that early way that people ate. Number 3, eating meals less than 5 hours apart. Often, it's only 4 hours apart. Eating 8 o'clock and then again at 12 o'clock. Another one is eating between meals. In the Philippines, they have a name for it. It's called timu. And at 10 o'clock, they want to have some bun or some sweet, dessert at 10 o'clock. So then the poor stomach is trying to make that butter, and it never gets a rest. Here's some more helpful. I hope everyone sees it as helpful. Some people say, I'm sick of all those rules about what I should do. But remember, it's the manufacturer, and he's simply telling us how it works. Page 163, if your time to eat is limited, do not bolt your food. In other words, don't gobble it down. But eat less and eat slowly. So keep the practice, even if the time is limited, keep the practice with eating slow. And of course you'll eat less, but that will be better for you than to eat a whole lot and because you're in a hurry. Again, those who are excited, anxious, or in a great hurry would do well not to eat until they have found rest or relief. I don't think this is for a regular practice, but there are times when it's better to eat off schedule because you can be relaxed at that time rather than keeping on schedule and eating in a hurry. It's better to be in a relaxed atmosphere when we eat. Why? For the vital powers already severely taxed cannot supply the necessary gastric juice. So that's the reason. They can't supply when you're in a big hurry and you got to be somewhere in 10 minutes. And so you don't get the benefit out of the food anyway. Your body has to process it without you getting the full benefit. So instead of thinking that these are a lot of requirements, we need to think that this is the explanation of how our body works. And if we're in harmony with it, then we will be healthier. Page 163 and 4, food should not be washed down. No drink is needed with the meals. Anybody wonders why don't we provide juice or some other drink or water at the table? This is why. Because there is a habit that a lot of people have to take some food and then wash it down with some drink. Why shouldn't we do that? The more liquid there is taken into the stomach with meals, the more difficult it is for the food to digest. For the liquid must first be absorbed. Now, from what I've studied, the best thing for our body is to have the food travel through it as quickly as possible. If it stays too long anywhere, it's going to have more potential to not be as healthy. And so when it has to stop working on the solid foods, or shouldn't be solid when it gets there, but on the food that we've eaten, and dispose of the water or the juice, then it delays the digestive process. Many make a mistake in drinking cold water with their meals. So it's harmful enough to drink water, but to get ice water, which a lot of people love, is even more harmful. Taken with meals, water diminishes the flow of the salivary glands. And the colder the water, the greater the injury to the stomach. The stomach wasn't made for ice water. And so it hinders the work of the stomach. Ice water or ice lemonade drunk with meals will arrest digestion until the system has imparted sufficient warmth to the stomach to enable it to take up its work again. So the problem in this quotation is delay. Liquid delays. Cold liquid delays even more. And so we want to leave those things aside. In fact, the drinking ice water is not good at any time. And there have been people that died by drinking a glass of ice water on a hot summer day. The shock was that bad to their system. Now, not too many people have had that happen, but it can happen because the shock is too much from the heat outside to that really cold. You know, I have people sometimes offer me water out of the refrigerator. I always tell them no, because I don't even like cold water anymore. Page 164, hot drinks are debilitating. But if anything is needed to quench thirst, pure water drunk some little time before or after the meal is all that nature requires. Water is the best liquid possible to cleanse the tissues. So things too cold are harmful, things too hot are harmful to the stomach. And I've always wanted to know, well, how close to the meal on each end can you drink water? Dr. Hansen was a doctor we respected very highly, and he seemed to be an extremely wise doctor. And his counsel was, you can drink water up to 15 minutes before the meal, but after a meal, give it 2 hours before you drink. And so, I can't vouch for that being the best plan, but here it does say some little time before or after the meal is what nature can do the best with. Page 164 also says soups, puddings, and other articles of the kind are often eaten too hot. Now, not only might they be eaten too hot, but we usually don't chew puddings, do we? We don't chew soups. They just go right down. So guess what? They don't get much gastric juice. So I think there's a double reason here for giving us this advice. And as a consequence, the stomach is debilitated. Let them become partly cooled before they are eaten. So it's better to, you don't want it cold. It doesn't taste good that way either. But to be where it's not under the heading of hot or too hot. Page 166, if we would preserve the best health, we should avoid eating vegetables and fruit at the same meal. Have fruit at one meal and vegetables at the next. So that's why at breakfast, we have the meal, usually with fruit, and dinner or lunch with vegetables. Now, among reformers, there's arguments about what's a fruit and what's a vegetable. I would say don't worry about that. Most of the issue is settled very easily. What is a fruit and what is a vegetable? Don't argue about the finer points. Doesn't really matter that much. Page 167, from the light given me, sugar, when largely used, is more injurious than meat. So many Adventists become vegetarians, but then they eat an abundance of sugar. That's actually worse than meat eating. So we needed that understanding. Page 168, the compression of the waist hinders the process of digestion. So when our clothing is too tight around the waist, then the stomach can't do its work as well either. So we want to have clothing that's loose enough around the waist. Not only does it hinder digestion, but says the heart, liver, lungs, spleen, and stomach are crowded into a small compass, not allowing room for the healthful action of these organs. Healthful Living, page 169 and 70. The thing that many of us like to do after we eat is take a nap. Exercise will aid the work of digestion. To walk out after a meal, hold the head erect, put back the shoulders, and exercise moderately will be a great benefit. So we have to avoid that feeling and go out. Now, this is not a forced march that she's talking about. It's not climbing hills, and going full steam, but it's a moderate exercise. Will be a benefit. Page 170 says at mealtime, cast off all care and taxing thought. Now you have to just ask the Lord to help you to put certain things away from your mind. You can take it up later. But during mealtime, it needs to be a happy time. And we don't need to be worrying about things. It's good for the mind to be trained to stop thinking about things. I find many times I have to tell myself it's time to stop thinking about that and get your mind off of it. So we need to practice that at mealtime. Page 170, the less the attention is called to the stomach after a meal, the better. Some people are thinking, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, or I ate too much, or whatever. The stomach doesn't like to be thought about. When it's done, when we're done eating, we don't need to think about it anymore. Later we can think if we want to make a change, next time, that's good, but not to be worried about what you did do. If you are in constant fear that your food will hurt you, it most assuredly will. So if you're thinking, what's in this? What's in that? Is this something that's going to hurt me? We have some reformers that are like that. And it makes the cook very unhappy to have that. Now, if you're allergic and in danger of having a terrible reaction, you need to find out what's in the food. But otherwise, just don't worry about it. Forget self and think of something cheerful. Now, why should we pay attention to all these things? Here, Jesus puts why. 3 John, verse 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. So, God is not pleased with all the aches and pains and all the sickness that comes upon the human race. He's not happy with that. He didn't want all that to exist. But he's given people a choice of how they live their life. And he's even explained now in great detail. As you can see, these are small details, some of them, and yet they're not so small in their effect. And so he's explained it all so that we can be healthy and enjoy things and have less trials and less problems. He promised this even back in Exodus 15, verse 26. If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God. How do we have to hearken? Diligently. So every one of the suggestions that I read today, we need to check ourselves, make sure we're doing them. In preparing for this, I'm going to make a few changes in what I was doing. And we'll do that which is right in his sight, and we'll give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none. How many? None of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee. So, he puts it both ways. Either we won't get sick, or he will make us well. Either way. If we will diligently listen to what he's told us to do. Now, we can't change the past. What we've done in the past is already done. So don't get all depressed and discouraged about the past. But as we move into the future, he wants to bring healing to us so that we have less and less of these trials of illness to have to put up with. So may God bless us to that end.